Hey there, how are you? For me, it's an especially exciting day of the pandemic because I'm going to be showing you all how I made this sweater. I can't tell if I'm being sarcastic or not, but I don't really think it matters. After seeing the Harry Styles cardigan, I learned to crochet just so I could make it. So naturally, when I saw the cherry sweater by Lirika Matoshi, I wanted to learn to knit so that I could make it. Well, kind of. I already knew how to knit, but it's been a while. So I embarked on the journey of succeeding, failing, mostly failing. I was trying to make my own pattern as an inexperienced knitter. In case you want to make this with me, all of the resources I used and my materials will be linked below, and I tried to explain the process as best as I could. To be clear, I don't in any way want to claim this design as my own. All credit goes to Lirika Matoshi and her brand, and I will link her website down below. So first of all, I've got this Lily Sugar and Cream yarn. It's a size 4 yarn. It is 70.9 grams. This is in the color Hot Blue. I got 5 of these, but I'm waiting on 3 more. I got these at Michael's for around $1.60. And then I've got this green yarn for the cherry stems, same idea, but it's the color Sage Green. And then I've got this for the cherries in the color Red. And this part's just me showing you the crochet hook I was planning on using, but I actually knitted it. So I used 2 US 8 knitting needles, they're 5mm, and then I'm also using polyfill to stuff the cherries. So first of all, I'm looking at the gauge right here on the yarn packet. In this video, I'm going to be using my measurements, but I know that not everyone has my measurements. So I kind of wanted to explain how I got each measurement so you could do that with your own measurements. It said on my yarn label that for a 4x4 inch square, it would be 20 stitches by 26 rows. Now, what is a 1x1 inch square? So I did 20 and 26 divided by 4, and I got 5 and 6.5. So for 1 inch of width, you'd need 5 stitches, and for 1 inch of height, you'd need 6.5 rows. So then whenever I was doing all of my measurements, I was just multiplying each of those measurements in inches by 5 or 6.5, depending on whether it was width or height, to give me the amount of stitches or rows. Just take your yarn label, find what a 1x1 inch square would be in stitches and rows, and then multiply that by the amount of inches that you're doing. So then that's how you can find your measurements for the front and back panels, for sleeves, stuff like that. I went ahead and casted on 90 stitches, and now I'm going to be doing the stockinette stitch, so it's just 1 row of just regular knitting. And now we're going to purl one. So as you can see on this side, you're going to see all those knots or loops, but then on the other side, you're going to see the pattern. I am done purling. But I was never done finishing that sentence. Basically, I finished purling that row, and then I decided to do 90 rows of 90 stitches, alternating between knitting and purling. That's what I'm working on in these clips. If you guys want some references to look at while you're knitting the sweater, I've been using the Lirika Matoshi website. Also, I've been using this Mia Maples video. I will link all of this down below, by the way, but she's actually wearing the sweater, so that was really helpful for me to kind of see the fit of it in action. Okay, so I just finished 90 rows. Now we're gonna do the neckline. I drew this, a third of all of your stitches is gonna be a neckline, a third of it is going to be a shoulder, and a third of it is gonna be the other shoulder. So I'm starting by dividing my number of 90 stitches by 2, and I got 45, and then I'm subtracting 2 from each of those. So I'm gonna knit 43 stitches, and I will be back in a second. So now you're going to take the second to last stitch on your right needle, and you're going to grab your left needle, stick it through that stitch, and then pull it over. And then I just did the same thing 3 more times, so in the end I had 4 stitches that were cast off. So now I'm just going to continue knitting. I'll check back in when I'm done. To be clear, I was just going down the rest of the row, doing regular knitting, no decreases. So I finished the rest of that row. So now I'm gonna go ahead, turn, and I'm gonna start purling until I reach the last stitch before the neckline. Okay, I'm back. I just purled all across here. I'm only going to be working on the left sleeve for now, and then I will cast off at the end, and then I'll start working on the right sleeve. These stitches will just stay on this needle until I finish this side. Instead of knitting this side, as one typically would. We're gonna go through 2 of the stitches, like that, so that then we can make a decrease. So yarning over and pulling through 2 stitches. So that was a decrease. So now I'm gonna go ahead and do 1 more of those. Now I'm just gonna keep on knitting the rest of the way down. And back, I just finished knitting this side across. And I'm going to, again, follow the same pattern of purling down. You want to go from the original dividing by 2 and subtracting a few to a third of your stitch count. So I'm going from 43 to 30. As long as you're getting from one of those numbers to the other, you can do as many decreases as you want. Make sure that you do the same thing on both sides. Okay, so I'm back. Here we've got the shoulder with nothing going on and the shoulder with all the decreases. So this is just about half of the neckline. We still need a piece for your shoulder to go. So I'm gonna do around 5 rows for the shoulder piece. So I'm just gonna work this part. To be clear, I'm gonna be doing no decreases here, just regular knitting and purling. I'm back. I've actually done 8 rows instead of 5. I realized that 5 would not be enough. Now we're going to fasten off this shoulder only, the shoulder that has the neckline. So turning my work over, I'm going to do the same thing. This time I'm purling, so purling 1, purling another, and now I'm just going to go ahead and pull 1 loop through the other loop. I'm going to just continue purling and pulling the second loop through the first loop. I'm done. The last stitch is on my needle. I'm just gonna go ahead and pull it off. I'm just grabbing some scissors, chopping, and then grab your fingers through the loop, pull this through, and then tighten. And there's one shoulder. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and move on to the shoulder and do the exact same thing, the same pattern and everything, and I will meet you guys when I'm done with that. I just finished the other shoulder. Since I did 90 stitches for the first side of the sweater, I'm just gonna do 90 again, and then I'm going to do another 90 rows. I finished 90 rows, which is the same amount as my first panel before I started the neckline. So right here is the front panel, and basically I decided that I wanted the shoulder piece to be less tall on the back than on the front. So to do that, I just did half of the rows I did for the little shoulder piece, which would be 4 rows instead of 8. And then the neckline seemed like 1.5 shoulders. So what's 1.5 of 4? That would be 6. So I did 6 rows of neckline and 4 rows of shoulders. And then 6 plus 4 is 10, and then I took the total amount of rows that I did for the front panel minus 10, and that was the amount of regular knitting and purling I did before I started doing the neckline and the shoulders. Once I was done with all the regular knitting and purling rows that I needed to, I started doing the neckline using the same exact pattern as the front panel. At this point, my front and back panels were the same height, so I did mattress stitch to attach them at the shoulders. Next up was the neckline. So since I'm not using circular needles, I'm not going to be going in the round, so I'm going to have to do 2 parts to the neckline and stitch them together. So you want to insert your hook, I meant needle, into the first stitch, and then you want to take some yarn, just make a little loop, put it onto your needle, and then you want to pull this stitch through. That is now 1 stitch you've picked up. Now taking your working yarn, you're going to go right into the next stitch, insert, wrap around, and pull through. Now you've got 2 stitches. So you just want to go ahead and continue this, pulling up all the stitches around the neckline until you get to the other side. Okay, so now I'm just turning the work. I'm going to be following a typical 1 stitch knitting, 1 stitch purling. I'm going to start with purling because the yarn is in the front. So purl once, And then I'm gonna knit one. And then bring the yarn to the front and purl one. And then bring the yarn to the back and knit one. So I ended up doing it 6 rows. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cast off like I have been before. So now I'm just gonna do the exact same thing that I did on the front to the back. Okay, so I just finished the ribbing on the back, and then I just had this super long tail. And so I just threaded my tapestry needle through it to stitch up the neckline together. You definitely can just add new yarn though. I'm doing something similar to how the mattress stitch was. So now that is stitched together, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so I'm done seaming both sides up. Now we're going to stitch up the sides. So first things first, my armhole is 7.5 inches. I got this by measuring the circumference of an armhole from a sweater that I liked, and then I divided that by 2. And then I used a tapestry needle and the mattress stitch to seam from the bottom of the 2 panels to the armpit, basically. There's gonna be 4 panels in total, 2 panels per sleeve, like the front panel and the back panel. So the first thing I did was I measured the armhole, which for me was 15 inches, and then I divided that by 2 for the 2 panels, and I got 7.5 inches. And then I multiplied by 5 because on my yarn label it says 5 stitches per inch. So 7.5 times 5 is around 40. So I cast on 40 stitches. And then I measured the length of the sleeve. So for me, I believe that it was around 17 or 18 inches. And then I just multiplied that by 6.5 because again, it was 6.5 rows for 1 inch for my yarn. Then I got around 115, 116. The main part of the sleeve will be 100 rows for me, and then the ribbing will be 16 rows. So what I did is I took that main sleeve part of 100 and then I divided it by 2, and then I just did like a rectangle. So I've got my 40 stitches cast on, and then I've got 50 rows of that. The next thing I'm going to do is 25 rows of decreasing 1 on each knit row. Purl row, and then on the knit row, I'll decrease 1. And then a purl row that's regular, knit row, I'll decrease 1. So I'll end up decreasing around 12 or 13 stitches. You can follow the same method that we used for decreases as with the neckline, and try and stagger where you put the decreases on the sleeve. I'm at 75 rows in total. I just did 25 more rows. Now I have officially 26 stitches on my needle. Now I'm just gonna do 20 rows of regular knitting and purling, so that would be 95 rows by the end. I just finished 20 rows. I wanna go from 25 to 15, doing 5 rows, 2 decreases per row. Now I'm going to do 16 rows of ribbing. Of ribbon gown. Now I'm going to cast off. Basically, I'm just gonna make 3 more of these. By these, I meant panels of sleeves. Here, I just finished my 4 sleeve panels. So this is me seaming the 2 sleeve panels together. I just used the mattress stitch, same thing as when we stitched up the sides of the body sweater. And now I'm going to take you guys into the past when I was explaining how I'm going to do the next part, which is seaming the whole sleeve to the actual body piece. Okay, here is my body panel, and the first thing you want to do is thread your tapestry needle. Here I've got the seam of my sleeve, and then over here I've got the seam of my shoulder. I'm just going to go ahead and line these 2 up, and then I'm going to stick my needle up through the shoulder seam, leave a little tail, and then I'm going to go back down through the seam in the sleeve. And now I'm just going to pull these 2 tight and tie a little knot. I'm gonna start in the right, and I'm gonna do the same thing where we go through the bars on the side. So insert the needle you're picking up the bar between the edge and the first row of these. And then pull that tight. Next, you're going to grab on this side the actual V. Again, you're going through a bar or two over here. And then right here, you're going through a V, the first one from the edge. Here's where I started weaving in my ends. I was going to use the typical over under method, but then I found a different one called the duplicate stitch method that was supposed to be really secure. So here's me trying that one instead. Definitely try it. I will link the video I used down below. We're on to the cherries. So I'm just kind of looking right now at the sweater, and it looks a lot like the cherries are crocheted. Like, look at that. So I think I'm going to crochet it too. Use this video. I'll link it down below. It's the cherry hair tie and keychain. So I'm gonna use that. Here's what I've got. It definitely needs some improvement, but it's not terrible. And it's way too big. So I'm definitely gonna make them smaller next time. This was just my practice. Wanted to figure it out a little bit. So I just counted on this sweater, and it looks like there's 16 cherries. And I'm assuming that there's none on the back of the sweater. So I'm just gonna make 16 of these guys. Right here are 3 different sizes of cherries that I made. So the one on the very right is the one following the YouTube pattern exactly. The one in the middle is making 5 single crochets in the magic ring, and then the one on the very left is doing 4 single crochets in the magic ring. The one in the middle is the one that I used to make earrings, and the one on the very left is the one that is on the whole sweater. In the middle of the pattern, it calls to do around 5 rows with no increases or decreases, but for the very left cherry, I did 3 rows instead. So the main reason why I washed it is because I didn't want the cherries to bleed into the blue or the blue to bleed into the cherries. So here, as you can see, I'm just pouring some mild soap into a container and I'm going to hand wash it. And they were not lying when they said that it might bleed. That is so blue, and I rinsed it a few more times and it still was super blue. So my plan was to wash it a few more times before I actually attached the cherries to make sure that they wouldn't bleed. Here you can see I was just laying it out on a towel and then rolling it up and squeezing it a little bit, gently wringing it so that I could get a lot of the moisture out. And then I laid it back on the towel for a few hours just to get it to soak up some of the moisture. And then after I was done with that, I ended up hanging it on 2 hangers, and then I moved it to a chair. It took around 36 hours to dry in the end, which is a long time. And then here I'm also washing the cherries, and I washed the stems.